Hi, I'm Megan Dutta, and this is an AVNation special. You're probably wondering why I am introducing it, and that's because I'm so happy to be interviewing everyone's favorite podcaster and newly inducted SCN Hall of Famer, Tim Albright. Tim, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on my own show. Okay.
Is it a little awkward for you? I like it.
It's a little, well, there's two awkward things. First of all, I am not old enough to be in a Hall of Fame, but thank you very much for putting me in it. And yes, you're taking over, much like Bradford does, but go ahead.
Well, it's not about age. It's about what you've accomplished.
There we go.
And
I like that.
You've accomplished a lot. So let's start. How did you get into AV? What kind of piqued your interest?
So I was in radio for a long time. That was my first real career. And I did morning shows, the vast majority of that. And my wife and I had our first kid. Mornings wasn't conducive for having a kid, so especially not a baby. And I was looking for a job and came across one that involved my former college where I went to school. And it was a number of things. And part of that was replacing projectors every year during the summer. And that was basically kind of the extent of it. And that morphed into learning how to design and install and program control systems. And I just kind of fell in love with it.
Sorry, the dog is barking.
That gives Mitchell something to do.
And okay, so when you started doing that, were you working as an integrator, an end user?
No, I was a tech manager. I was a tech manager for a small community college in Southwest Illinois called Lewis and Clark Community College. And we had a small team, had about 300 rooms that we were maintaining. And, this was right before the major market crashes of the mid 2000s. So we had no money, right? Not that the state of Illinois ever has money, but we had less even then. And since we were a community college, we had even less than the universities did. So you kind of did, you did the most with what you had. And so we learned how to do things, right? We trained, and thank God for manufacturer education. And I'll speak about that all day long because, it really is what saved our butts in the 2000s, because we were able to get educated, and Avixa and Infocom at the time had education as well. And that's where I got my CTS the first time was through that. And really learned the art of AV and the art of design and programming.
I think that's a really key point, is that it is an art. It's not just science and technology. There is an art to it. And so what do you do to create those experiences and make it artful and not just here's the tech that I think you need?
Well, it's simplistic, but it goes back to something Avixa has said for a number of years. And what are you trying to accomplish? What is the end goal, right? What's the experience you want to have? And for us, for the education industry, it was, simple communications for the instructors to get their message across, right? To get their instruction, to get their lessons. And it was a transitional time, at least for us and for our college, because we were not only going through a digital transition in the AV industry, going from analog transport to digital transport, but our faculty were as well. We still maintained VHSs at the time, and transitioning from those and making sure that we have the rights to convert them into digital. And if we didn't, how do you do that? And where do you put those those copies? But also helping them transition from whether it was an overhead, and I swear to God, still as late as 2010, we were maintaining overhead projectors, and I do mean the old school, put a frickin' piece of cellophane on a illuminated source, and you throw it up there, helping those faculty transition to at least PowerPoint, right? Maybe not Prezi, maybe not something fancy, but at least PowerPoint. And we still, we had one instructor who was tenured, and so you get damn near whatever you want, who was doing slides still. So we had a lecture hall that we were rehabbing completely from bottom to top, but still we had to maintain the ability to play slides, because one 1 hour class per semester, this instructor used slides. And so we had to put that into our design and made sure it was, not only was it able to be seen on the projection screen, but we also had to be able to control it. which was a whole nother, a whole nother learning curve.
So speaking of control, that's kind of like your jam. I notice like
Yeah.
you're always gung ho whenever we're talking about control. I go quiet and you go ham. Like you're so excited, your face lights up. So you start doing that there, and then did you move into a full-time control position?
Sort of. So from Lewis and Clark, I joined an integration firm very briefly. And buddies of mine, still friends of mine, called Modern Communications out of St. Louis, and I was joined them, and shortly thereafter, I kind of got headhunted, and I don't know if it was the fact that nobody realized I was looking for a job or what, but it was an independent programming house called Innovad also out of St. Louis, and they said, "Hey, you should come work for us, and you should run everything." And I'm like, "Well, I've never been an operations manager, and I'm not sure I'll ever be offered the job again." So I took that, and it was a fantastic experience. I learned a lot. I made an awful lot of mistakes, and learned from those as well. But it was a great experience, and it was actually where I met a number of folks, including our buddy Jeremy Caldera, who he and I ended up on a job site together. And if you get me drunk enough, I'll tell you about it. But it's one of those that you go through years of therapy just to get over that job. And he and I ended up in New York together on the 18th floor of some building in downtown Manhattan. And at the end of that job, we actually got purchased by an integration firm out of St. Louis, and still friends of mine today, John Laughlin and CTI. And it was during that transition that he's saying, "Hey, we bought the company, and this is what we want you to do," and he's doing some really great things and talking about some really exciting things, and I'm like, "That sounds great," and I'm not going to do it. And it was one of those points in your life where you go, okay, you can turn left or turn right, and that is when I took AVNation and said, I'm going to do this full time. And 5 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago now, it's been that way since.
So we're recording this in 2020, but you're in the 2021 Hall of Fame, which is
Thank you for clarifying that.
AVNation's.
Yes.
AVNation's 10th anniversary also occurs in 2021. So it's fitting. So how did you start AVNation? You mentioned you started out part-time and it turned into full-time, but what gave you the desire to start this?
We started in 2011, and so the short version is I my job was in radio. I loved broadcasting. I still do. It gets in your blood. My first job in radio was at KMOX in St. Louis, and if you're familiar with the radio industry, that is one of 3 or 4 50,000 watt AM stations. It's a blowtorch. And it is the home of Jack Buck. It was the home of Harry Carey, just for the record, before he ever went to Chicago and ever became a Cubs broadcaster. He was a Cardinal broadcaster, just for the record.
Just for the record, nobody cares about that.
But that was the home of the Cardinals, and the home of the Blues, and the home of sports talk and news talk. And so I that's where I cut my teeth, being a producer, and it gets in your blood. And so, long story, meandering throughout the broadcasting world and finding myself in AV, and 2010 comes along, and I've gotten myself into podcasting, listening to it. And I was teaching audio production at the time, and I was teaching my students how to do podcasting. And I was looking around for something that resembled Leo Laporte in This Week in Tech for AV. I was looking for a weekly synopsis of the news of the week and why it matters. And it didn't exist at the time. And quite frankly, we said, okay, so I said, let's just make it, right? Let's do it. I've got a broadcast background. I think we can do a pretty decent job. And so in late July of 2011, I kind of, virtually stuck my hand up in the Twitterverse and said, I want to do this. And people kept coming, and we haven't stopped since. We record every Friday. To a technical standpoint, it was when Google Hangouts was starting to be a thing. They had just released it, and ended up on a Google Hangout with a person from Harman and a longtime programmer. And the person from Harman happened to be Bradford Ben, and the programmer happened to be Mr. Rich Fregosa. And it was the three of us just chatting on Hangouts. And I'm like, well, I could take the output of this and put it into a recorder and press record, and that would be a podcast. And I'm like, that works. And so we just kind of did that, right? And it evolved and changed, and we paid for the bandwidth through side jobs that I was doing. And you get bigger and you evolve and you get more things and more opportunities. And we kind of got an invitation to go cover ISE for the first time in 2015 was our first year, and quite frankly, it was more money than my side jobs would cover. So we did a Kickstarter, and our audience and the folks that supported us came through, and we raised 10 grand in 30 days, which was a lot of money to me. Still is, and we were able to cover that, and we took a bunch of us over there, and Chris Netto and George Tucker and Bill O'Donnell actually, and me. We got an Airbnb 2 blocks off the Rye, and we hung out there for a week, and it was a great experience, and it was a time for us to kind of expand and spread our wings and get introduced to the European market and to the rest of the world. And then we said, okay, let's kind of take this out for a spin. And it's one of those things where I was the only employee for a long time, and then about 2 or 3 years ago, we hired a fantastic producer, Mr. Mitchell, and pressured him to go full time this year, and hired a salesperson, and we've done a number of other things, and slowly but surely, this was not what we would call an overnight success, but we're getting there.
I don't think anything is truly an overnight success. I think there's always so much work behind the scenes that people don't know about. So it's good for people to hear this. AVNation just didn't start out as this mega media outlet for the AV world. It really started out as some guys going, well, this will be cool. This doesn't exist. Let's do it. So how did you get all the equipment, and now you have your full on studio?
Mm-hmm. Slowly but surely, when we started, so I mentioned the fact that I've been in radio, and when I was on the air at a what we call a AAA station, or an adult contemporary station, the last station I worked at, we were on a morning show, and we used EV RE20s, and I was like, well, that's what I used then, so that's what I want to use now, right? And again, it was side jobs that I had done. I'm like, okay, so I went on I think B&H at the time, or Sweetwater or whatever, and said, how much are these? And they're not cheap. They're not expensive, but they're not cheap. And so you say, okay, this is how much this is important, right? This is an investment in the quality of your product. And so we purchased that, and we purchased this, and slowly but surely, kind of this, that, and the other, and start purchasing other things. And then once you start getting sponsors, and folks are like, hey, you're kind of cool. I want my stuff on your stuff, on your shows. You start getting introduced to other things, and some of it is you're like, I don't think I want to use this duct taped and bubble gummed piece of equipment. But if it's a good piece of product, you take a listen to it. And Shure came along, and they're like, hey, why don't you use an SM7B? I'm like, well, I've never heard it, so let's start there. And they said, well, here's an SM7B, and I'm like, oh crap, that sounds good. And it's one of those things where I had been a fan, and I had used the EV mic, and it's still a good mic. It's certainly not a bad mic. And I made that switch probably about 2 or 3 years ago now, and very excited about their new USB one. But it's one of those things where if you believe enough in the quality of a product, you're going to purchase it and make the investment in your stuff. And so that's kind of what we did, kind of ad hoc as the time went along, and as the needs arose, right? For a long time, we rented gear, specifically, depending on where we were. But we rented it, especially if it was less expensive or a wash, to rent it and bring it and have it delivered to Vegas or to Orlando, as it was to physically purchase it and lug it with you. And I'll still do that from time to time, especially if it's an event where it's just 1 or 2 of us, running around, and then we don't have to lug things back and forth.
So you've got the setup, you've got the products you need. How do you get the people? I know you're passionate about relationships, and people in the industry love working with you. So how did you get there? I
have no idea. I So a number of years ago, I am a natural introvert, and people hear that and they have a hard time believing that because of what I do. But I literally am. I am a natural introvert, and that doesn't mean that I don't like people. It's just my energy comes from sitting at home alone, meditating and whatever. It's a job. It's exhausting to hang out and do what we do. I love it. Don't misunderstand, but it is tiring. But I read how to win friends and influence people probably about 20 years ago. And as a producer, again, that's what I was doing at KMOX. You have to reach out. You have to build those relationships, and it has nothing to do with. It's not transactional, right? It's not, oh, hey, what can you do for me and I can do for you. It is building a relationship, and I learned that very early in my broadcasting career, because you'd talk with PR agencies or folks that you would have on a regular basis, and I'm watching now folks that I had on 20 years ago that nobody knew from Adam, but that they're being used as legal experts and election experts now. That I think it's fascinating because I knew them 20 years ago, and I could probably still email them, right, because of that relationship. Is because everything that we do in life, and Brock McGinnis mentored me early on about sales is all relationships. Well, it is. Everything else we do is also relationships, right? This is not, you are not in this alone. You are not an island. How you treat people and how you treat your employees, how you treat your friends, and also how you treat the people who don't treat you well will come back to you. And building those relationships and valuing people and valuing what interests them is important. And the Dale Carnegie book, he says, I don't know if it's famous or not, but it stuck out to me. People are inherently interested in themselves, so ask them about themselves, right? And that will end up building rapport. Well, that works for me because I would much rather hear about you than I would rather hear about me. And I would much rather hear about you than I want you to hear about me. Again, because I'm an introvert and I've got, I would much rather listen to you and find out what interests you and find out what is interesting about you. Because I know what's interesting about me. I'll never go bald probably. And I can't grow a beard. So there's nothing down here, but there's all kinds of crap up here. So there you go.
That is very interesting. So when you're making these relationships, one of the things I know we're both focused on as AV journalists is diversity. How do you ensure that your show and your publication features diverse voices? And why is that important to you?
I'll start with why it's important, because representation is important. And that's something that I've learned. It is not something that, and I have said this before several times, I am what I am. I am a white, straight guy, right? Middle of America, born and raised in just outside of St. Louis. And that is who I am. And some of my biases, and all of us have biases, so don't at me at it. We all have biases that we grow up with. My biases come from that lens. And there are times when you have to ask for help in seeing some of your biases. I could very easily swing a dead cat and have every single show and every single thing that we write and produce at AVNation be nothing but old white guys. It's very easy because the industry is full of old white guys. But to do it well and to have diversity, it takes work. And the reason that it's important for diversity is because of representation. It matters to a young person of color to see someone that looks like them and sounds like them and has had the similar experiences that they do. It's important for them to see themselves in the media. It's important for them to see themselves and their experiences represented in a positive light in the media. Media is a very powerful thing. And I think that the last 20 years, I'm not going to put everything on the last 4 years because that's just silly. But the last 20 years, we have really demonstrated that in the United States. And if we work hard, especially those of us in the media, if we work hard, to get those voices and get that representation out there. And again, in a positive light, I think that we will do well and we'll be able to evolve our society in a positive way. And the question is, how do you do that? Well, it is work. It is getting other people. And I will tell on myself, and I will tell this story probably as long as somebody gives me a microphone. There are two instances. Both of them happened this year. One was with you, and one was with Charmaine Torella, another member of the Hall of Fame class. We put together, and I do mean threw together, a virtual event called Learn from Home. It was a pretty interesting thing. Somebody said, hey, we should do this, and it was right around April, and we're doing our thing and working our thing, and we're throwing together our program. And I don't know if it was a call or an email that you sent me, and you said, hey, dude, there's no women on your panels. Now, I didn't do that on purpose, right? I didn't set out to have nothing but men. But again, you get into a habit, you have a bias, you have a rut, I've called it. And we're throwing this thing together, and it's okay, I know this person, I know this person, I know this person will never say no to me, so I'm going to grab that person, right? And so it kind of stopped me. I'm like, oh, she's right. Let's change that. Okay. Back in June, I was doing an episode of AV Week on race and diversity in the industry and just in society in general. I had a conversation with Charmaine, and she made the comment that someone had made to her about how we don't ever have, quote unquote, any Black people on AV Week. And as a straight white guy, you at least for me, there's the immediate knee-jerk reaction. Of course I do. I have Black friends, and that's just the common, trope. Until you sit down and go, okay, no, I don't, right? I don't have it. And it's the same kind of reaction with you is I don't. And so you actively go after that. There are folks who will push back on that. Well, you're just picking them because they're Black, or you're picking them because they're a woman, and you're this, that, and the other. Yes, they're qualified, and they happen to be a woman. They're qualified to be on the show, and they happen to be a person of color. Both of those are important. And if you don't see why they're important, we're going to have a longer conversation. But a number of years ago, we at AVNation made the commitment to say, okay, we're going to make a concerted effort, to have at least one woman on every program that we do. Now, we don't always succeed at that, but we aim to. Okay. Same thing with the person of color. After my conversation with Charmaine, I made the commitment, both publicly as well as to us and our board. I'm going to aim to have a person of color on every one of our shows. There's a couple ways we do that. First of all, it's through processes. We at AVNation, for AV Week, we have what I call my gang of 6. You may or may not have recognized it, but I have 6 people that I have on every 6 weeks for AV Week. Starting in 2021, 4 of those are women. One of those is 2 of those are people of color, rather. So that's a process that I can put into place. Again, it happens. It puts me into a process. The other thing is when you're starting to schedule your shows and your programs, you look for people and you connect with them, and it goes back to relationships. You build relationships. You show that you're sincere, and then people, will start introducing you to others. Another way is to get my stupid butt out of the way. And one way to do that is to introduce people like Frank Pacala. Frank Patacala is taking over a show that I had done called the IT AV show. First of all, he completely renamed it, which I thought was fantastic. It's his completely, right? And Frank is an IT professional who works for Diversified, so he's in the AV industry, and he's a person of color. So he is taking that over completely. And there are other ways that we can do that. Is just getting actively working to do it. But if you don't do the work and you just kind of go on cruise, then you're just going to kind of go down the same roads.
I think that's wonderful and a great note to end on. And as SCN Hall of Famer Alexis LeBroy says, if you can see me, you can be me. And I love that you follow that mantra. So Tim, thank you so much for coming on your own show and letting me interview you. This was so fun. Tell people where they can find you, and don't say not to follow you.
Don't follow me on the Twitters. By the time this airs, I will have already finished my hard 75. You'll still get some fitness stuff from me because my aim is to beat Chris Neto. I know it's not a competition, but it's a competition. And by the time this airs, the Bears will already have been kicked out of the playoffs if they even make it. The Blues will be in the midst of hockey, hope and pray to God. So, go by the website, avnation.tv.
And you can follow him on Twitter at TD Albright.
You could do that.
And you can follow AVNation at AVNation TV. I'm Megan Dutta from SCN. You can follow me on Twitter at SCN Mag or at Megan A. Dutta. And you can check out Tim and all of our other Hall of Famers on our website at avnetwork.com.